All right, how's it going? So today I'm going to show a simple argument for Christ's divinity in the Gospel of Mark. You might be wondering why St. Peter there. I'm going to show that in a second. You might be wondering, well, why are we picking Mark? And the reason is it's because Mark is an underrated gospel for Christ's divinity. The main reasons is because it is the least popular gospel if you search that up, and also it's the shortest length and it's a non-apostolic account as it comes from Mark, comparative to John, who is an apostle, and because of his strong claims of divinity. All right, and what I'm about to show is going to add a whole lot more weight to the Gospel of Mark, and you just got to bear with me. The Gospel of Mark is the Gospel according to Peter. And what is the evidence? We have the fragments of St. Papias, and this is affirmed by St. Irenaeus in his book Against Heresy. All right, so who is St. Papias? He lived from 70 AD to 155 AD. He was the bishop of Hierapolis, and he was known as an ancient man who was a hearer of St. John the Apostle and a friend of St. Polycarp. So he was a disciple of St. John and a friend of Polycarp. And if we look over at who was St. Irenaeus of Lyon, he lived from 130 AD to 202 AD. He's most famous for his book Against Heresy, which I actually have next to me. It's his big 5-volume work against the Gnostics. He was a disciple of St. Polycarp and a writer of Against Heresies. He's declared a doctor of the church in 2020. And actually, the reason why it's called the Fragments of Papias is because he wrote this big 5-volume book called an Exposition of the Oracles of the Lord. And it was basically showing the history of the Gospels and oral tradition, but it ended up getting lost to time. So that is why we only have the fragments. So what I'm going to show is 2 quotes from the Fragments of Papias, and it's going to get reaffirmed by St. Irenaeus in Against Heresies. So if we read right here, this is the Fragments of St. Papias. Mark, having become the interpreter of Peter, wrote down accurately whatsoever he remembered. It was not, however, in exact order that he related the sayings or deeds of Christ, for he neither heard the Lord nor accompanied him. Well, wherefore Mark made no mistake in thus writing some things as he remembered them. For one thing, he took special care not to omit anything he had heard, and not to put anything fictitious in the statements. And this is affirmed by St. Irenaeus. After the departure, Mark, the disciple and interpreter of Peter, also handed down to us in writing what he had been preached by Peter. All right, so why is this important? Mark is the earliest written gospel. Bible Hub says 50s or 60s. I know this says 65 to 75, but that still shows that it was the earliest written. And actually, John, we have evidence for the 60s. And it's from the account of the head apostle Peter. So right here, Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ. And we go down here to Matthew 16:18. Blessed are you, Simon, and I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. So if you're Catholic like me, we already know that he was the head apostle and the first pope. All right, so what is the argument for Christ's divinity? It's a simple typological argument. So typology is basically things that are from the Old Testament that kind of foreshadow something the new. It gets fulfilled, like Mary being the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant is something that was from the Old Testament, or one of the messianic claims for Jesus. So if we read in Mark 14, Jesus before the Sanhedrin, we see in verse 53. So we know Peter's here. They took Jesus to the high priest and all of the chief priests, the elders and the teachers. The law came together. Peter followed him at a distance, right into the courtyard of the high priest. They sat with the guards and warmed himself at the fire. So we see here, Mark 14, Jesus is taken to the high priest, and Peter followed them at a distance. So Peter knows what they're going to be saying. All right. And then we see here, continuation of Mark 14, verse 60. Then the high priest stood up before them and asked Jesus, "Are you going to answer? What is this testimony that these men are bringing against you?" But Jesus remained silent and gave no answer. Again, the high priest asked him, "Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?" So the high priest is asking who Jesus is, and Jesus answered with, "I am," said Jesus. All right, so this is important. So high priest asked him who he was. "Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?" And he says, "I am." All right, you've probably seen this one. It's very simple, very low tier argument, but because of the fact, the added weight that it's not, because most people think it's coming from a non-apostolic account, Mark. how could Mark have known this? But the fact that it's actually St. Peter himself who was preaching this and was getting and wrote it down by St. Mark. All right. So we go, Book of Exodus. So this is Moses, the burning bush. Moses said to God, "Suppose I go to the Israelites and I say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. And they ask me, what is his name? Then what shall I tell them?" So this is God saying to Moses, "I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent you." So again, we go back. They ask Jesus who he was. "Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?" He says, "I am." That's what he answers. And we actually know that they take that as him saying that he is God, because we read in the next one that they rip his clothes, call him a blasphemer, and spit on him. But we go back, but we go forward, and what is his name? So the people are going to ask, what's God's name is, and then God says, "I am." All right, so I get that was a basic argument for Christ's divinity, but it's the fact that it's the added weight of the fact that it's from St. Peter's perspective, and it's St. Peter's basically in the early church is called the Memoirs of St. Peter. So it's basically the long name of the Gospel of Mark is the Gospel according to St. Peter, scribed by Mark. But thank you for watching. It's my first video. I hope you liked it. Just a simple argument.